Hello, and welcome to the DCL Learning Series. Today's webinar is titled The Fast Lane to Content ROI, Delivery First, Structure Second. My name is Marianne Kalahana. I'm the VP of Marketing at Data Conversion Laboratory. And just a couple quick things before we begin. This webinar is being recorded and will be available in the on-demand section of our website at dataconversionlaboratory.com. We invite you to submit questions at any time during this conversation, and we'll save some time at the end to answer those questions. We are really happy to have our partners, Fluid Topics, joining us today. And before I introduce our speakers, if you could just click to the next slide, I'd like to give a quick intro to Data Conversion Laboratory, or DCL as we're also known. DCL services and solutions are all about content structure. We've been in business for 40 years and are recognized experts in converting, structuring, and enriching content and data. Content structure is the foundation on which the FAIR principles rely. That means findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. So if you have complex content and data challenges, we can help. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce David Turner, Digital Consultant at Data Conversion Laboratory, and Fabrice Lacroix, CEO at Fluid Topics. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Yes, thank you so much. This is great. It's great to have the honor here to talk with Fabrice. And Fabrice, Marianne got the chance to talk about DCL a second ago. Let's give you a chance here to talk quickly a little bit about Fluid Topics and your background.
Sure. I can do that in 1 minute. Fluid Topics is a software solution. It's a SaaS solution, and it's a content delivery platform called a CDP, content delivery platform. And as the name says, the goal of a CDP is to make content more easily findable, accessible to people. So it's a solution specifically designed and engineered for technical documentation, okay, product-related content. It's meant to combine all the content that you have around your product, create a unified knowledge hub, create a single source of truth, and make that content available and feed multiple apps and touch points where you can help your users with more contextual and personalized content. So that's the entire idea. So that's what we do. We help tech companies, and I said tech companies because products are complex in that case. Then there is a lot of knowledge required to install, run, service, maintain those products. And we help them change the way their users engage with the product, transforming operational efficiency. So the two use cases that we see the most are really transforming customer support operations and field service as well. So depending on the types of product that you have and the problems that you have to solve.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for that. Well, why don't I set up our topic here with a quick little bit of introduction. I think it was Don Norman back at Apple Computer who first coined the term user experience. That was, I don't know, about 30 years ago. But the concept actually goes back, I think, as far as the 1950s. And since then, we've seen some pretty big growth in user experience and a lot of changes in user experience. First, I think probably around the PC revolution in the 1980s. And then when we had our web revolution in the 90s and 2000s, and then really, I guess, the mobile revolution of the last 10 years. And what I mean by that is, for the PC revolution, we saw kind of the big move to electronic publishing. And then when we had the web revolution, we saw kind of the move to HTML and email and PDF. But the mobile revolution is kind of different because it's driving something a lot more dynamic. right? So modern content delivery means providing the right content at the right time on the right device in a dynamic and a personalized manner. And it involves a lot more real-time content. I mean, in the 1980s, we were pretty happy to get a manual that was in paper. You know, in 2010, we were pretty happy to download a PDF. But you know, now I want to know, you know, what's the latest on my product? I've got to know. So that means on the content production side, we're producing content faster and faster and faster and faster. And so to facilitate this, I think a lot of companies are looking at their tech docs production processes, they're looking at their technologies, and they're starting to, you know, make investments. And this sort of takes us here to this next slide. You know, how do you get there, right? I think the traditional conventional wisdom, if you will, says, well, you're going to go out and you're going to hire a really good structured content consultant. You're going to start investing in, you know, a component content management solution, maybe a structured content authoring tool. You're going to hire a really reputable data conversion company with handsome consultants to do, you know, a big content migration process. And in the end, it's a big investment, and that's okay because there is a promise of future ROI. The problem I think that we run into is that this promise of future ROI sometimes can be tough to sell to senior executives. You know, somebody like this who sitting here looking skeptically at these invoices, you know, they start to question, right? And as a vendor who only gets paid when these projects actually get approved and start to move forward, you know, I want to make sure that the senior executives approve these things, right? Because it gets really frustrating to start working with somebody on a project and go down the path of pricing and all this kind of stuff, only to have it fail to get funding. You know, people ask me all the time, you know, hey, who are your biggest competitors? And I think my answer a lot of times kind of surprises them. You know, because I think our biggest competitors tend not to be other data conversion companies, but they tend to be the competing priorities at these potential client organizations, right? Customers can't get budget, or they can't get enough budget, or worse yet, they don't get buy-in from leadership. And so projects kind of maybe start, but they sputter. And anyway, I think you probably, I think you mentioned you have a couple of different examples here. So I'll let you kind of pick that up and talk about this.
Yeah. I can tell you I have more than one example that totally reflect what you describe as an issue for many to have those projects happening. I have really two types of companies here and two types of example. We have customers or prospective customers that reach out to us and say, oh, you know, I've heard about dynamic content delivery, modern content delivery. So can you show us what 3 topics is about? Because obviously you're a leader in that domain. So show us 3 topics. So basically we demo the product, we talked about the use case, the needs, and they're totally wowed and say, oh, that's exactly what we need. So it's like we took to them 1, 2, 3, 4 meetings, last a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, and then suddenly they disappear. And when I say they disappear, it's like really for a year, 2 years, 3 years, you have no news, impossible to reach to contact them. And then, and really that happened, I can name the companies, really. And it's like 3 years later, they call you back and say, okay, now we're ready. You're ready for what? No, we're ready for 3 topics. We're ready for modern content delivery. So, but what have you been doing during the 3 years? Oh no, we had we had to put a CMS in place first. We had to move to structure. So that was we had a lot of work to do before making the rest, the CDP, the delivery part happen. So that's interesting because there is like 3 years of work, and then they reach back to us and say, okay, now we're there. So that's one. And the other situation is the companies that talk to you every year. So it's like same. They reach out. They want to see 3 topics. They're totally thrilled with the idea. They totally understand, get it. They have everything. They say, okay, now we're going to ask for the money and say, I call you back in a month. So like my budget approval is in October, so I call you back mid-October. And then they call back and say, so bad. We didn't get the budget this year, but next year. And then they call you back like in July, August for a refresh and probably update the proposal, blah, 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 everything. And then say, okay, budget approval is in October. I call you back mid-October. And then I call you back mid-October and say, failed again. We didn't get the budget this year because I don't know, this other project was selected by the steering committee. Or say, because you're competing internally for the money. Companies can't run all the project at once. You need people, you need money for that. So basically what we see in large companies, whatever you want to do when you have a project, you're competing with others internally.
Yeah.
So, and we see those companies like trying to get this budget approval and failing at getting the budget approval and getting the money for that. So why do you fail? And then they explain us what they do. And they say, okay. And they were asking the money not for free topics. They were asking the money for the entire CMS, content migration, plus content delivery, plus everything at once. So it was a huge project, a lot of money. And for sure, because that's a lot of money. And as you said before, management don't necessarily get the point why it's important. They are not funded. So that's interesting to see. And we have tons of examples like that.
And again, it's not that they're not going to need structure, and it's not that they're not going to need consulting. It's not that they're not going to need all these other pieces, CCMS and a conversion partner with, handsome employees. It's just that there can be huge obstacles when it comes to putting this all together as a big, large project. Obstacles that kind of take you out of the fast lane, to RFP. So why don't you take a second here? I put up on the slide, some of the large project obstacles that we thought about. Take a few minutes here and talk through some of these and how you've seen them affect these projects.
Sure. Say you start like you're writing your content, authoring your content, probably with unstructured FrameMaker or Word or Wiki or something like that. And so your goal is to move to structured content authoring, whether it's data or whatever. So you're there, you have all this file stock of content that you've been writing and authoring, and you're still managing, like I said, 10,000, 20, 100,000 pages of content that you've been creating over the past years. And suddenly you say, okay, now I need to migrate that content because I want to move to structured authoring. So if your goal is to take all these, 100,000 pages and transform that, for sure that's a lot of work. I mean, it's not magical like that. You have to do content modeling, as you said, then you have to do the content transformation. It's not just the format that you transform, because when you move to structured, usually that's the opportunity to readapt the chunking of your content and see what is reused and analyze the reuse. And then this part needs to be a separate topic and moved separately from. Then you start putting conditions and variables inside your content. So that is a very, very lengthy, complex process overall. So it takes a lot of time, probably 2, 3, 4 years. We see people working on migrating their content. And again, it's not just format transformation. It's really all the content migration and content revamping. It's like 2, 3, 4 years. And during these 2, 3, 4 years, probably half of your time, half the time of your team will be dedicated to that as well. But the problem is that when you work on revamping your content, you still have to produce the new content as well.
Yeah.
So that's why it takes time as well, because you cannot stop everything and tell your company, you know what, we're just going to do content migration for 1.5 years. And during that time, we won't be able to produce any new content at all. You can't do that. So that adds up to what you do every day, which means even more time. So you've got a lot of content, lots of resources required. It's probably going to harm a bit your everyday work, slow you down. Then you have to train your people to the new tools, which is even slowing you down a bit more. So and cost money as well, the tools, everything. So that's where you come to, when you add up all that, that's easily $1 million, $2 million, $3 million project. You really analyze the cost of the people and all that. I know you already paid a salary, but still, I mean, this is time you spend on that. So basically, yes, you have it. The obstacle are, you go to your execs, you go to the steering committee, you say, this is the entire project. you put a number and you say, okay, it's going to cost 3 million. And the guy says, okay, and what do we get for that? You tell them, you get structured content. And
they
okay,
say, what?
What? Okay, what? And you have to train and make sure that all your team is ramped up as well with this new way of working and all that. So that's a very tough sell. No wonder why you don't easily get the budget approval for that and the money and the support for that, because you say, okay, we're going to be slower, it's going to take time, it's going to be a risky project, and at the end, we'll deliver the same PDFs, but we'll be better at writing them. Tough sell, really tough sell.
Yeah, it really is. And I live in the world of structured content, and but yeah, it's not the sexiest thing to sell in terms of, and it's not the most tangible thing. When I'm at parties, I typically get out about the part that I work in structured content, and then people, take the conversation someplace else because they can't get their minds around it, so much less an executive there. So yeah, it's kind of no wonder that these projects take so long to finally get that buy-in and to finally get the investment together. And you said 2 to 3 years. I actually just talked to somebody about a month ago, and this was somebody who put out an RFP just now for a content system 7 years after they first told me that they were looking for a content system. And so anyway, let's continue to break this down just a little bit here. So I think, as we mentioned earlier, the traditional approach or the conventional wisdom says, let's choose a content management solution, let's work with a consultant, let's hire a data conversion company, let's start migrating the content as a first step. You're going to spend 2 to 3 years on that, work out all your bugs and your kinks, get everybody pulling in the same direction, and at that point, hey, we've got structured content. So now we can start looking for a delivery platform, we can start creating style sheets, and we can really do that CDP project to get us to dynamic delivery. Now, at some point you're going to need all these pieces, but I think your point today is going to be maybe there's a problem with the order that we're doing these in. What is the problem with doing the things in this order?
Yeah, I think the problem, and I totally understand that people think that it's the natural way of doing it, because usually you need to write something before making it available. So it's like on a timeline basis, you have to write before publishing. But here, the thing is that the content already exists, in fact. So you don't have to write it. You're just moving your content from one format to another one. And the thing is that if you look at it, those content migration and CMS projects are very complex, as we said, and you described it well, all this content migration, revamping the content, and they take time, okay? So you do the thing that takes the longest, and that takes the more time, the more complexity first, meaning that during that time, you don't deliver anything new, as opposed to a CDP project, which usually takes way more time. It's a matter of weeks, and if really you've got something complex, probably 2, 3, 4 months, okay? So we're not talking years, we're talking weeks or months, and less risky, less complex. But I think it's very impairing, and you're shooting in your own foot, because you start with the most complex one, the riskiest one, and you keep for the end the one that is probably the easiest, the shortest, and probably the one that is more appealing to people, because that's where you would create the value.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about perception of value a little bit. I think that's got to be huge as well.
Yeah, I think, yeah, really, and I think that's the matter of perspective. It depends on who you are. The thing is that as a tech dev team, for sure, you are more aware, educated on the value of structured content. You know what it means to be able to reuse content, conditionalize content, go faster, have reduce translation cost as well, because when you start reusing content, you only have to update the translation of what has been changed. So there's tremendous benefits to structured content, which we don't deny. The thing is that as a tech dev team, for you, you see a lot of value in the CMS, because this is your own tool. This is what you need for being more productive every day. And the CDP as well, you understand, as a tech dev manager, that it has value as well, because you want to move away from those PDFs. you want to go to something that is more fine-grained, dynamic content, very personalized content, and all that. You totally understand. So you put the value, probably a little bit more value or as much value to both projects. And because you have this, you see the same value in both projects, but you understand that probably you'd like to be structured first with having your metadata ready and all that, you should do the CMS first. But now, if you look at it from a user perspective or from an exec perspective, you don't care how people write content, how this content is created, whether it's in Word or people copy paste, whether you use a wiki. I mean, as long as you can have a good UX user experience in finding, accessing, and reading that content, the way it's created doesn't matter at all to you. So the value is in how you make that content visible, accessible, reusable to the end user, and how they can comment, engage with the content itself. But the way you write it, the way it's done before, they don't care at all. So the value, there's no value to the CMS project for an exec. Okay, unless you start showing the number and say, okay, this is the ROI on translation cost or something like that. Okay, but you have to put this spending on the translation cost in regards to the cost of the entire project, and we were talking about millions, so the ROI may be pretty long as well, as opposed to selling something that is more appealing to everyone. Say, guys, let's change the user experience of how we deliver content. Let's make support agents or field technicians more efficient because they can find the right piece of info in a snap. So you see, the value is not the same depending on who you are.
Yes, and I think those changes those differences in value are actually what are going to drive this change in the process. So let's let you talk a little bit about how this how the process would change a more effective path.
Yeah, imagine now that you do the what if thing. Imagine now that you do the CDP first, because putting the delivery portal in place first is, as we said, way faster, matter of weeks or months, less complex, and you create the value. So you can sell something that creates value in a very short term, and value for your company, for the users, for all the stakeholders. And the good thing is that it's possible. You may say, well, it's not possible because I don't have structured content. And this is where we can tell it is possible because modern CDP platforms are able to ingest any type of content, even if it's unstructured content, and still create a new user experience that is way better than just PDF on a website. Okay, those platforms are still able to sort of automatically ingest this unstructured content and make it look like, chunk it, and make something with it. So you can still get lots of benefits with your content as it is, do it faster for something that is way cheaper, and then you start moving to the next phase, which is, okay, now we are going to optimize this content, and now we're going to move forward with the CMS project, which is going to take time. But doing CDP first buys you time because you have already delivered results. And during that time, in the background, you can start this CMS project without the burden and the being under scrutiny of the people in your company.
It's a fascinating idea, and so what I'm hearing is, we're not giving up the CMS project, we're not giving up the content consultant, we're not giving up, thank goodness, the conversion partner. We're changing the order. It's almost like fake it till you make it with the content that you have.
Exactly that.
And it's gonna seem structured even at the outset. You try to get that set up first, which ultimately removes the obstacles, gives executives something to grab onto so we can get more projects approved. It's a win for the content organization, it's a win for the customers, it's a win for the vendors. So it's a win-win-win situation. And that's, I guess, really what the kind of the primary focus is that quick early win.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, you have to show something that people can get excited about. I mean, if you show this new way of delivering content and see that even with this small investment and rapidly you can change the UX, then you have the attention of your management, and then you can deliver new messages that say, okay, we were able to do that in few weeks, few months, but now we could do something way better. We could go way further if we add a little bit more money to do some structured content. But at least now they listen to you because they start seeing, getting an idea of what it means, changing the user experience and delivering content in a new way. And they start understanding it because they see it. Otherwise, it's a very conceptual to them.
Absolutely. So now they can get their arms around this. Now the executives can see, hey, the users are getting something from this, and you're not asking me for as big of an investment. You're asking me for a smaller investment, a smaller time investment, a smaller financial investment to get the delivery part set up first. Let's get started. And by doing that, it gets you set on the path to go toward the structured content, and it starts getting you the money that you need. So you're starting to win me over here. Sounds good. How does the company get started with this kind of approach?
I think that I say here, you have to start with the end in mind. I mean, you know where you want to go anyway. You know that you want to do the CMS and structured content. You know the end of the story. But by starting like that and by putting the delivery in place first, you can start grabbing your content and see how your content react as well to this new way of being delivered. And you can see the metadata that you need from a UX perspective, at least. What do people need for filtering content? What are the metadata that matters to them to spot the right piece of content? What is the UX that I need? What is the granularity? What is the content they use and they really read every day that I should focus on in first place? So you will learn a lot. And by starting like that, you will iterate rapidly. And that gives you a lot of input for how to optimize the rest of your project on the road, and which is mostly your CMS project.
And it may not be perfect at this point. It's going to be something started. It's going to be something where customers can see a difference. You may not be able to do everything that you ultimately want to do, but you're doing something. And so let's talk a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit more about what it means to get started with dynamic delivery itself and how this whole thing works.
Sure. As I said earlier, I think the difference between putting content on a website, and you have to understand the difference between how you used to deliver content before without a delivery platform like Free Topics and what it is to have a CDP. If you don't have a CDP, basically you have a website, meaning that you generate content, you have your data sources, you have your whatever you write in Word or FrameMaker, and then you generate either PDFs or HTML. You put that on the staging server somewhere, and the IT people get the content on this internal staging server, and then they put that somewhere else on a web platform. So they design a website, they put the content, there is a little bit of search on top of that, but it's mostly like reusing classical website technologies, okay, on your TechDoc content. And that's really the way it works. When you have a CDP, and this is where you are a little bit struggling, because if you have Word files, the only thing you can do at this time is mostly generate a PDF and then put a PDF somewhere on the staging server, and then you will be publishing PDF on your website, documentation website. But when you have a CDP, and the CDP is totally different by nature, the CDP just takes the content as it is. When it's Word file, you publish the Word files. When it's FrameMaker, you can publish the FrameMaker output to the FrameMaker export. When it's Wiki, you can scroll the wikis or connect to the APIs of the wiki platforms, get all that. That's the collection part, okay? So this has this native capability to ingest any type of content. Then the role of the CDP is to do this transformation of the content, okay? And part of this transformation, when you don't have structured content, is still fake it, as you said before. It's really, we can take a Word file. We're going to split the Word file by chapter, subsection, something very naive, but at least that creates a bit of granularity.
Yes.
And transform that into pieces of HTML. indeed, there is not a lot of semantic here. It's very naive in terms of, this is probably not how you would transform that into structured content in terms of granularity for reuse, but at least you're not publishing PDFs. And the CDP is able to analyze this content and fake something that is more granular, transform into HTML, and then add a bit of metadata on top of that, and then make that content available through the different channels, track the usage, because we've got a ton of analytics. We know exactly what how people search, what they search, where they click, what piece of content they read. So we know all that. That's part of the value of a CDP as well. So that's the idea with a CDP. It's not like pre-generated content on a website, but it's really a platform that has all the technology for transforming the content and making that content accessible and findable the right way.
Let's dig into that whole idea of not having to go through the big conversion, not having to do the big migration at the beginning. You know, as a conversion vendor, it's a little frightening to me. I think, oh my gosh, you know, my customers aren't going to need me anymore. But I think what I'm hearing is that, yeah, it's going to be still naive content, but you know, there is a way that you can get started with just what you've got. To talk a little bit more about this idea of deliver first and come as you are.
Yeah, I must say I was quite afraid doing this talk with you and this conversation with you, because as you said, like it looks like we're advertising the fact that we don't need content conversion, which is exactly not the fact. I think we need that. The prime is that when do you do it, at what time, and how do you get the money for that? We need structured content. We need a lot of semantics in content, and we'll talk about that later. But here, the idea is that even if you don't have this well-structured semantic with semantic tags and everything, and a lot of metadata on your content, we can still do something, which is the come as you are. Come with your content as it is. We widely prefer having structured content as an input. I mean, we can ingest native data directly, the data files, and we can leverage all the structure, all the richness of data, and we can do crazy stuff with data. But if you don't have that yet, and I said data, I mean, you could imagine any XML format or something highly semanticized. But if you don't have that, still we can do something for you in the meantime, and we can do something. Plus, probably not all your content would be migrated, or probably you have data sources that are not meant to be transformed into structured content, because I don't know, this is a markdown content for describing APIs or something like that, which there is no meaning to writing this documentation in data, or something that is automatically generated somewhere. So as well, that's the idea with a CDP. We can fake it for content that is not structured. We can as well aggregate and combine content that will never be structured anyway, and put that in one place. But at some point, to go one step further, it's way better to have structured content. We can do way more things.
And honestly, I mean, I think you could feasibly have a workflow even that says, you know, maybe you've got 30 years worth of content that you're wanting to ultimately migrate, and that's a hard sell. But, you know, perhaps it's something where you could, you know, say, well, let's start with, you know, maybe the last year, or let's start with just these certain products. We can have DCL convert those, get them into structured content for us. It's a smaller batch. That's something we could sell, and then we can use that to help start populating our CDP.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. That's a very good point. I mean, the idea here is that because you have the CDP in place first, you can start migrating and play around with a piece of a subset of your content, or the content, or you can start documenting a new product with the new tool, and probably keep old products, legacy products documented with the legacy tools, and start saying, okay, we have this new product line, we have this new product, and here we could start writing structured and start learning. And then probably we learn a bit as well, and then we start migrating for products that are still sold and very active, under active maintenance, and probably we migrate a little bit more content, and then you can iterate and slowly move that content, but you can do that in the background. And because you already have the CDP in place, then that's what I say. That doesn't change the UX. I mean, your content gets better and better, more tags in it and so forth. But you can do that in the background, and you don't have to wait to have everything transform before changing the way you deliver.
Yeah,
and you can get a lot of benefits very rapidly.
Yeah. So here I put up a slide that just talks about some of the benefits here, even before you start getting the structured content. If you want to talk a little bit about some of these things here.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, truth is that those things are real stories and real numbers from our customers. Some of them, most of them, have structured content, but you would get the same result and the same benefits with unstructured content published like that, because it relates to the fact that at some point we create some granularity, and those are the benefits brought by the platform itself. So one of the benefits that and are very appealing to management is that when you start publishing your content in a modern way, granular content, not structured yet maybe, but at least granular with HTML format, we can optimize the way we expose that content, we show that content on the web to web search engines. And we have customers, and we can even give names here because we talked about it during a webinar recently. It was Hexagon PPM, which is a huge software vendor, and they were used to publish PDFs on a website. And they had no internet presence, no web presence. You couldn't find them on the web. The only thing that Google was indexing was the corporate website, so maybe a few hundred pages. And they moved to free topics, and partly structured, partly unstructured. And they suddenly have, and I think now they have 307 topics. So it's quite a lot of content. And part of that content is publicly available. Not all of that, not all of it, but mostly available. And we expose that content. We show that content in a very optimized way to Google. And suddenly they have maybe 200,000 topics, pages, indexed by Google, meaning their web presence goes from few hundred pages to hundreds of thousands of pages. So you can imagine the impact on being referenced on Google. And they tell us, they said, now you know what? When people search for the keywords that are matching our business, we are always in the top 4 results. And usually that's the tech doc.
Yeah.
So you don't pay for that. Imagine the money that marketing is spending for just matching the keywords that people search on Google to advertise that they have the right tool for that. You have all the keywords in the tech doc. You have all the content already existing. So if you expose that content, and with a CDP, that's what we do as well, then suddenly you can say, marketing, you can pay, you can give money on my project because I will help you be more visible on the web. And that's all this money you won't have to spend by buying AdWords or keywords on Google. So, and again, moving from structured and PDFs to structured content and granular content. So, and we have 3 customers that have really conducted focus groups and studies, very, very documented studies on measuring how long it was taking to people to find a piece of info. So they had designed scenarios, like you have to solve this, this, and this, and they have really measured people. We have all the reports and say, okay, well, like it was support agents, field technicians, end users, and so forth. And they had designed multiple scenarios like solve this problem, find the info on how to solve that. And they just put some people, half of the people in front of the legacy portal with a bit of static HTML, PDFs, and free topics. And basically they all give the same number, 60 to 64% faster with free topics.
Wow.
All of them. Meaning that something that was previously taking like complex problem 10 minutes, now takes 4 minutes. So you can imagine the money when you have thousands of people working, looking for info on your product. And so that's tremendous. The ROI is huge. And it's even better than that, because you know this thing which is called the path of least resistance, meaning that people do the thing that ask for the less effort to them. Meaning that if something is difficult to find in your content, okay, and you know it's going to take, because you're used to the product, you're used to the TechDoc portal, to these PDFs, and you know that looking for something is going to take you 10, 20 minutes. But you can open a ticket and call for support, and you'll get a reply in maybe 2 minutes. Gonna take you 1 minute to open a ticket and complain about not finding something to get the reply. So what do you prefer to do as a human? Will you spend the 20 minutes fighting in the tech dark and having all those PDFs? Or will you reach out to the support, especially now that you have those chat windows and all this thing? But it means that as a company, you invest in content, and the more content you have, the more difficult it is for people to find the right info, because it's even more PDFs. So you put money on your content, and at the same time, you have to put more people replying to the chat. So it's very frustrating, and because it's not you don't help people finding the right info. But if you have a CDP in place, and we've seen company, and this one as well is public, the Swiss Qprint, so they do high-tech printers, industrial printers. When they've put 3 topics in place, they said, okay, 34% call deflection, reduction of the number of tickets open within the first 2 months. In less than 2 months, we've seen the number of calls and support tickets open reduced by 34%. So that's a lot of money. That's tangible. You can sell that to your management.
Yeah, these are the kinds of things that certainly will help you get executive buy-in. And it also gives
the problem more interested in the ROI of call deflection and web marketing, web presence, than reuse and translation cost that probably you will see in 3 years. You see what I mean? It's like you don't advertise the same things.
And it also gives them a taste for wanting more. Okay, let's figure out what else we could do. We just started with what we had, right? What do we need to take on from that? Before we get to that, talk about smart content, I want to talk about the content strategy piece. You mentioned a minute ago, talking about how this approach can help you to iterate and really inform your content strategy. So I want to give you a chance to talk about that really quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. As you said, it's a pretty complex project. And basically, when you start, say you have, I don't know, 1,000 PDFs, okay, Word files of FrameMaker and structured frame, and you want to migrate that into structured content, let's say data, make it simple. So you move from Word or FrameMaker to data. And we all know that it's not just about formatting and the format itself. It's about granularity, designing the topics modeling, the metadata, all that.
As we put, there's a difference between valid XML or valid data and useful XML or useful data.
That's it. That's the point. And the thing is that you don't know yet. I mean, you have your Word files, and basically you don't know what metadata are valid, how people will access, what they read, how they read your content. So the thing is that if you can, with this fake it and then make it way of doing, put your content, even if the granularity is not the right one, and start putting some metadata, and then you can iterate. Oh, people need more metadata on that. And when I start searching, and probably we could filter on that, meaning that if we want to filter on, I don't know, let's say we need to tag content, whether it's for installation, troubleshooting, regular maintenance. See what I mean? Like this sort of metadata, and suddenly you realize that would make sense. Then you say, okay, now we need to design the taxonomy for that, and you put that there. And then you say, okay, and people ask a way to filter by content types, ref guides or whatever. Say, okay, we need a taxonomy, and we need to tag content according to this taxonomy, this way of filtering content. And then you learn, because people tell you what they need, because they start having a tool that they like. And then they come back to you and give you a lot of insights on how they would like to search content, navigate content. And that helps you, that gives you insights, and that helps you design this content migration strategy. Otherwise, you start from a blank page and you don't know where to go. And we see that it's even more money to spend and even more time if you have to reiterate while you structure your content, than knowing a bit in advance what path you should go down and what is the granularity, what you're going to reuse, and so forth. So you will learn a lot, and that's part of this iteration that you can start immediately with unstructured content as well.
Well, now I want to bring it back though to structured content, because that's the topic that's near and dear to my heart. We talked earlier about, it's not that we're just getting rid of the CMS project or the CCMS project. We're not getting rid of structured content. We're not getting rid of the content consultant. We're just changing the order, right? Because At some point, if you're going to make some real strides, you're going to need the structured content, you're going to need the data conversion, you're going to need the other pieces. But now you've got an actual value proposition that you can give to management so that they're actually kind of thrilled, you know, with the idea. So talk a little bit about that, about the move now from dynamic delivery to these investments and creating this smart delivery.
Sure. I think that when you start, when you fake it and you just use the CDP capabilities to chunk, let's say chunk, right, really those unstructured files like Word files, and that's okay for web delivery. Okay, you have this granularity. It's better for indexing, accessing contents directly at the right position at the right place. It's pretty good, and that's where you change the UX and you upgrade the UX that you have from your website, static website, to something more modern and more efficient. But we all know that the real thing that people want to achieve are, how can I use my content to feed a chatbot? How can I use my content to do inline help? Because I'm a software vendor as well, or there's software everywhere. Even if you're doing hardware, there's a piece of software somewhere. You may have an app, and you want to do inline help in your app, or you want to do, I don't know, you're in the maintenance, you're doing hardware, and you want to do augmented reality or virtual reality, and you want to, or even if it's for training people, and suddenly have the instructions be displayed inside or on top of, you know, as a layer on top of this image, when you sort of use your tablet and you're like filming this device, and suddenly your tablet recognizes the different elements of the engine or whatever, the hydraulic system, but then suddenly you want a little bit of info displayed on that screen. You cannot display the entire PDF. You see what I mean? You cannot do that with PDF. Or smart goggles. You won't stop. You cannot read your PDF in the smart goggles. It's like you think like that. The entire PDF displayed inside this small, in an inch like that. You won't do that. So you need very granular content, fragmented content, tagged content at a very fine grain. So that's where I'm pretty. We have to be honest with the fact that this first step by faking structured content is not enough if you want to go the next step.
Yeah.
Then you need to have this more fine-grained, well-designed content,
Right.
And this is what we call smart content, because it's very it's what you need for doing those more advanced stuff.
Absolutely.
And interestingly, usually management comes, the exec or the CEO, maybe I already have done that 2 or 3 years ago, because you've seen that on a Gartner conference and say, oh yeah, guys, I heard the future is chatbot. Can we do a chatbot? And what we see most of the time in companies, and it's not seen, I had this discussion with a lot of Fortune 100 companies. They all try to do this chatbot thing. All of them have tried. And they ended up rewriting content separately because their content was not structured, not ready yet. And basically what they did is say, okay, let's do a proof of concept somewhere. And for doing that proof of concept, we need to have very, very fine-grained, very semantic content with all the tags and everything, so that we can connect that finally to do sort of new UI stuff, new channels, new apps, new chatbots, AR, VR. So, and that's where you see the gap and the disconnect, because you have all this legacy content that exists, which is probably, I don't know, 500,000 pages or 1 million pages because you're a Fortune 100. And it took you 30 years to write all that and make it valid content. And just somewhere someone wants to try this chatbot project, and they start rewriting the content. So they read your doc and they rewrite that. They will never get it done the right way. I mean, it's just for the POC, that's a pilot. And they say, okay, this is what we need. Now, how do we connect the real content that we have now that we understand what we need? And this is smart content. This is where we need to migrate the content for real.
Yeah. And this is the perfect time to start thinking about your consultant. This is the perfect time to start thinking about your conversion vendor. And I know a really good one. Perfect time to bring in, you know, your content management system. And then I'll just stop here and just say quickly, you know, I would just encourage all of you organizations that as you look at this, you don't necessarily have to tackle all of your content at once. It's not something, I mean, obviously we would love to help you convert, big, massive things. We could scale to any size project, but you don't necessarily have to do that. If you work with a good solid partner, you can, move content over and update content, over time, and it'll help you to, like you talked about before, iterate and get a little bit more value. And if you've already actually, moved to, this kind of a platform, this is a good time to maybe think about what else can I bring? What else can I bring to, maybe that's being dynamically delivered, but that we want to bring to smart delivery. Because I mean, ultimately, there's a lot of benefits to structured content, right? And I'll just reiterate several here. If you don't just stop with the delivery platform, you can use this to start taking advantage of reuse, right? So instead of having to make updates in 17 different places and 17 different documents, you can make it in one place and reference it everywhere else. It makes content faster to update. It makes it more easily adaptable to localizing content, maybe for different cultures or geographies. It's a lot less expensive to translate because instead of translating 17 documents, you're translating one document, and it reduces the risks of content inconsistency, which is a huge thing when you think about like regulated industries and things like that. It certainly enhances your search. There are more things you can do with search. I mean, you're going to get a search bump when you move to your CDP process. When you start structuring your content, there's more options that you can take. There's more accessibility features that you can add. You can start, personalizing content at scale, be that personalized messaging through the packaging, like a GS1 digital link format, making your chatbots, like you talked about, a lot more intelligent. You start empowering AI, machine learning, all the other data analytics tools, because again, while they can all provide some value with unstructured content, you really have the key to open the doors to the big power when you add that structure, and add that that ability to do smart delivery. So anyway, we're going to wrap up here in just a second so we can do questions, but you guys provided this to the webinar, this great slide here, and I want to give you a chance to just kind of talk about the cost versus the value.
I think it's pretty, it's visual. I mean, if you start with the CDP first, which is the purple one, you start delivering value rapidly. The value is this yellow line, so you start having a lot of value rapidly for smaller project, little cost. And then you can start having your structured content migration done in the background, which leads you to the point where you have enough structured content and enough metadata, structure, semantic in your content, then you can start smart delivery. And then again, you start having this new increase of value that you can create for your company. So I think that's really a better path, because instead of having this flat or no value delivered for 2 or 3 years with a lot of cost, if you did the other way around, which is basically what we talked about for this past hour, 3, create value first as much as you can so that you get the support of your management, of your execs, get the money, get funded. Then they will ask themselves for more. They will give you the money. What we see with our customers, when they start like that, all of them were pulled with money on them to do more because they got the traction, they got the willingness of their management to go one step further.
And so vendors like us, instead of sitting around and just hoping that projects are going to get funded, you're taking an approach like this, we have a much larger chance. So if you're a content consultant out there, you can point people, hey, start looking at your delivery platforms. If you're a component content management system provider, start pushing people at towards these. Here as a conversion vendor, I'll tell you, start talking to the guys at Fluid Topics, because that can get you that kind of buy-in that you need. It does help you to control costs here, faster ROI, all these things that are listed. So anyway, well, we're now up against the last 5 minutes here, and I did want to leave some time for some questions if we have them. So Marianne, why don't you come on back on and let us know what questions we've got. Be happy to answer.
Yeah. One question that always comes up is costs. or budgeting. So, we know it's hard to just give a blanket statement of how much a CDP project costs, Fabrice, but can you speak to how one budgets for that? Does it depend on the complexity of the content? Talk us through some of that budgeting for a project like this.
Well, I can give real numbers. I mean, I've been talking about weeks or few months of work for rolling out a CDP, and probably in terms of costs, if you consider at least the cost for consulting, not what you do as adding the content, but for example, if we do the consulting for setting up the platform or someone else does it, we're talking about few tens of days on average. It goes from 10, 15, 20 days to, I don't know, 40, 50 days at most. This is already a big project, I mean, for a CDP. So you can really do a lot of things quite fast. And really, when I say it's a matter of weeks, it's really that. So so the cost is like it's not huge. And again, and for the tool itself, SaaS, we're talking about few $1,000 a month. I mean, it's not like million. It's not like million a year. It's less than 100,000 a year. It's maybe 40,000, 50,000 a year. That's already a significant customer. So you see, and you have all your portal, all the tool. You get rid of all the servers, the time that you have maintaining your existing portal, which costs a lot of money as well. I mean, sometimes we have customers telling us that, in fact, Flick Topics is less expensive than the cost of maintaining their own existing portal, the people, the machine, the security holes that they have, with this pressure on security and all that, maintaining legacy systems like that. So, so it's very, very affordable, in fact.
Okay. Not to mention the money you're going to get from your marketing department, because they're going to be paying you for SEO.
Yeah, make them pay for that. You're right.
Can you speak to the people who are working on the CDP? There is this relation to the CMS project. Are they the same people working on the project?
I would say yes and no. Anyway, the people from the TechDoc team that are usually more involved on the CMS project will be as well working on the CDP project, because anyway, they will provide the content. They will work on the metadata and all these things. But because it's usually most of the time a front-facing tool, probably the IT guys will be part of the project, and security review, and probably marketing will step in as well and say, okay, we have our things to say, because it's visible to the customers or whatever. Or if it's more field technicians for an internal group of people, then you got the support people coming in, the field service VP, whatever, steps in and say, I want to be part of that. So more people probably around the table. That's probably the most complex part of a CDP project. It's at some point you attract a lot of people, and that makes it a little bit more difficult to manage than the CMS project. The CMS, you're on your own. That's secret project, Nobody wants to deal with data except the TechDoc team. But the problem is that because nobody cares, nobody comes to your table, but nobody cares about what you do as well. So you see, the drawback is the advantage, and conversely, I mean, in the other way around, that's the project is easy, it's visible, but it's visible, so many people want to be part of it.
Yeah.
Well, we have 1 minute left. I'll just quickly throw this out there. Have you ever seen customers for whom this approach backfired? That is, management says, CDP works. Why should we spend more? Maybe they don't understand the value of the, extending beyond to smart delivery.
Honestly, never. I never saw that. And again, probably because David explained it well, probably because at some point, the people themselves internally are asking for more, like better and pilot project. And again, because you don't have to necessarily, you're not forced to migrate all your content at once. So meaning that you don't have to ask for a lot of money. You can do it over time, meaning that the money that you need for migrating your content, can be spread over more time. And each and every time, by showing the ROI, if you start with a piece of your, I don't know, 10% of your content, and show that you have ROI here as well. Because you have ROI, as you said, David, you have ROI for translation costs and all that. So, and you can start proving the ROI on a limited part of your content.
All right. Well, thank you both. Thank you, Fluid Topics, for joining DCL in this conversation today. We've come to the end of our hour. Thank you, everyone who's taken some time out of their afternoon, early evening to join us. The DCL Learning Series comprises webinars like this. We also have a monthly newsletter and a blog. You can access many other items related to content structure, XML standards, and more from the on-demand section of our website at dataconversionlaboratory.com. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.